Welcome to another live edition of the Deep Look podcast. We are on youtube.com every week, Tuesdays at noon Eastern. I am the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner. Big weekend in college ultimate as we had the President's Day invite out in San Diego and some very interesting, exciting results that we are going to dig into today. Keith, first and foremost, we didn't get a chance really to catch up. I wasn't on the show last week. Sorry, I missed you. We haven't had a chance to catch up about the Super Bowl and then, of course, this weekend's NBA All-Star festivities. And
are you okay to talk about the Super Bowl?
I've really been avoiding it, to be honest with you. Very tough. Very tough. It's tough when you have the team that you feel is the better team and you don't win. And that's what I think happened this year. Really tough. So many chances to score touchdowns. We just couldn't pull it off, Keith.
Dramatic game, though, at least. I mean, you got a lot of excitement. That offers very little solace when you're a fan of one of the teams, especially the team on the losing end. But it was at least an exciting game worth the watch.
It's kind of a grinder of a game. And then Usher came out at halftime, and it turned up the rest of the way. What did you think of the halftime show?
Electric. It was great. It was extremely Atlanta, which I'm proud of. I did not have high hopes for it necessarily, not because of Usher, but just because I generally am skeptical of the Super Bowl halftime show. And I thought it was a wonderful production. Whoever actually planned and organized the visual component, like the actual production of the event, I thought did a fantastic job because they ended up with a really entertaining product.
Yeah, when Ludacris came out, everybody went crazy because everyone was like, "Is Ludacris going to be there as a guest?" And the party I was at, everybody went nuts. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, just man, like McCaffrey fumble. Like I was saying, I don't remember the last time he fumbled the ball, and like for it to happen on a drive where we were just dominating to open the game. Like there's so many things and it's little stuff where it's like, oh, well, what if he made the extra point? What if he didn't fumble the ball? What if we could block the D-line properly when we have a wide open Ayuk in the end zone to score a touchdown late? I don't know. I'm smarting a little bit still, Keith.
Did the NBA All-Star weekend was it a salve for your wounds at all, or?
No, it was trash. When the dunk contest lineup came out, I was like, I literally don't know who three of these players are. I was texting somebody who's a big NBA junkie, and they're like, oh, yeah, this guy, he's an incredible dunker. He's in the G League. I'm like, why are there G League guys in the dunk contest? I mean, McClung, legit, he really is a great dunker, but the only thing that did it for me this weekend was Steph versus Sabrina, which totally lived up to the hype. It was way better than the regular three-point contest.
It did. It was the thing for the weekend. And I think it was great. I think there was, of course, a lot of awful, toxic conversation around it. But hey, there was conversation and there was discussion and hopefully some people learned some things. But also the one thing you had to walk away knowing is Sabrina can shoot. She's got that thing. She's just splashing them. It was really fun to watch. And I think that because of the success around it, we will get to see stuff like that again. I mean, Caitlin Clark's coming in the league, maybe not next year, could be 2 years, but we'll see what she decides. But there's gonna be shooters for sure.
Yeah, no, it was fun. I was watching the TNT overtime nonsense because, long story, I didn't have access to regular TNT, so I missed all the commentary drama. So I just watched them shooting. And I'm keeping track myself because there was no graphics up. So I'm keeping track of how many they've made. So it was really fun. It went right down to the wire.
I don't understand how the commentary was just it seemed like they were unprepared for a thing that they knew was going to happen. They just seemed like they didn't even know how they wanted to talk about it. It was
just
bad.
Like the players
did himself a disservice.
They do not care. They don't care. The whole thing needs to be shot into the sun. The game was embarrassing. I don't know why they got rid of soft cap. Soft cap the last couple of years has made this so much more watchable, and then they got rid of it for I'm not really sure why. And it was clearly worse this year. So maybe they'll go back to it.
It would be more fun watching the NBA All-Stars play a 4v4 indoor game of Ultimate than that basketball game.
100%. 100%. All right, it's time for a new segment here on Deep Look. We're going to start doing this every week. It is the trivia question of the week. We already have our mailbag question of the week, but now we have our trivia question of the week. Keith, what do you got for me?
Also, we've got a weekly trivia question. Charlie's going to try. Of course, you at home are encouraged to also see if you have the answer. We'll be looking at the chat to see who's got the right answers down there. And if you're hanging out, A, appreciate you showing up early, be one of the first people here. But B, there's a little thumbs up button if you want to go over there and just hit a little thumbs up. We appreciate that too. Trivia question of the week, our first ever. All right. We're going to start with the World Games because I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about World Games for some reason already. Which World Games players? Let's actually. I'm going to change this. Let's do how many. How many World Games players from the past 2 cycles have had no all club selections prior to making the World Games team? No all club selections
prior to making the team. Okay.
Yes.
We're not counting alternates, right? We're just counting.
We're not
players
no
on the
alternates.
primary team.
Basically, think about this like who broke out basically by making the team and after that.
Yeah, sure.
Is a good way to think about it.
Okay. I'm looking at the last year's list from 2022. I think many of these players had I can't remember if Claire Trope had gotten an all club yet or not in 22, summer of 22. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no to Trope. And I think she maybe is the only one, although Carolyn Normile, I think the year she was on Scandal. Now, I'll say no to Carolyn Normile as well. I think everyone else already had. Okay, so that's 2. I'm going back to 2017. Finney probably hadn't yet because I remember it being kind of surprising she made the team, and then she was like so obviously a beast. So I'll say Finney for 1. Nick Stewart for 2. George Stubbs, he probably did. So I'm going to say total of 4, and I gave you my names.
All right, Kenny Taylor in the chat says 2. So you've got some of them. You got Carolyn Normile, who has not had an all club selection from that first team, but there are 2 other players from the first team from the most recent team that had none, which is Nate Goff, who maybe
really?
still. Yeah, so
I guess
he
that
was a
makes sense.
breakout player here.
Yeah.
He was a breakout player and then a depot D, but he still, as this last year was his first all club selection with a second team selection. And then Kayla Helton was another one. I think that
get out of here. Is that true?
Wow. That's the Fury effect, I think. But also, I think she had been not considered like one of the best players on Fury necessarily when stacked up against the types of players who were on the team at the time. And she got 2 first team selections since then. I mean, it's clearly just incredible. So that's going to bring me to another point in a second. But you were right about Finney with their earlier team. But there were 3 more on that team. You mentioned Nick Stewart, but Georgia Bosher, who
I thought about
serves, I actually
Georgia
taken time away. So she had like missed the first couple of years of Ultiworld doing all club awards.
Sure.
But was a good player, but she didn't really come back until she came back with Space Heater, right? Like we hadn't seen much of her.
Good point.
And then the one that stands out to me is Chris Kocher. He's a player who I think people didn't realize how good he was until he made and then they were like, oh, this guy is like that. And he started taking off basically immediately after that. I don't always know though whether the correlation is between how we perceive players after they make the team, or if it's like, oh, this player is really burgeoning, and so there's going to be some players who make the team from that position, and then like they get so much better. Like it's just at the time that they're also playing really well and playing and becoming better players. I'm not really sure. I'm sure it's probably a bit of both, but.
I should have known about Kocher because Pony was bad back then. Like they weren't going to nationals. It's really hard to make
Mhm.
an all club team if your team's not at nationals. It's not unprecedented. I don't think you would know. Maybe that's a trivia question for a future week. But he was very good. I'm sure we were surprised a bit that he made the team, but I mean, he was clearly the best player in New York at this time. And
Which wasn't a big deal at
subsequently,
the time.
right. When Pony got good, it became more clear, and he had better players around him. It became more clear how good he was. So, wow, that's more than I thought. So, it was a total of 6, 7?
Seven total.
Seven.
And to go back to Kayla Heldon, because I mentioned that she like didn't compare as well to her teammates on Fury or was masked by the Fury effect. She's made 2 all club teams since making the team, but they were both with Flipside. So leaving and going to a place where it was like, oh, you are the centerpiece of the team, like you are the star of the team, has elevated our ability to like laud her in a way that we've always felt like it's so difficult on a Fury team that distributes their production so much that it like weakens, I think, a lot of their award cases, even though the players themselves may be really strong.
Well, great first trivia question. That's more than I would have guessed, and it shows you how hard it can be sometimes to ID talent on teams when they're especially on a deep team or a bad team. And then also that, perceptions change. Like it's probably the case that Finney was an amazing handler for Fury and we weren't recognizing it as much as we should have because there were other bigger stars on the team. And then when she made the World Games team, we started noticing it more. You're looking for it more. So, and I also think playing on the World Games team for weeks and weeks and months, like you're getting better. I mean, you're getting asked to do a lot with and be a focal point by the nature of a 14-person roster, and you're playing with the best players on earth and incredible coaches. So like that alone is going to be an amazing level of development for you as a player. So pretty interesting to think about who will be on the next World Games team. We'll discuss that in a future show. We got a lot to do today though. So let's move on to Prez Day. And just quick off the top, if you haven't been paying attention this weekend, in the men's division, Cal Poly Slow beats Colorado 15-11 in the final. In the women's division, Oregon upsetting Stanford 10-9 in the final. So I think we got to start with the men's division. Slow, the favorite here. They were the 1 seed, and they really took care of business, Keith. I mean, they did have a couple close games along the way, but they really pulled away from a Colorado team that's been in the semis conversation for the last few years.
Yeah, it didn't really feel that close, their matchup in the final. I think that Slow clearly looked like the superior team, and that I think that might have been even without Seamus Robinson playing. They were just clicking at a different level, and yeah, they're 2 tournaments in. It's Colorado's first tournament, so I think that there's a little bit there, and Colorado's missing a coach, but like, those are just details. Like that doesn't really make up for the difference in what we saw on the field, and Slow gets the 4-goal win, but like it just didn't really feel like they were all that challenged, and their defense really took Colorado out of what they wanted to do on offense. Very impressive performance from Slow, and I think you've got to say that they're the best team from the West right now. They're the best Western team that we have.
Well, let's talk about the question that is going to hang over this team now moving forward. Hangover is the wrong terminology, but follow maybe. Are they championship contenders? Is this a team that can go beat a UNC and win the college national championships? Where do you see that right now, Keith?
On tape, I mean, I think they do look like the top challenger. I mean, I think they look. We haven't really seen UNC with their foot on the gas yet. We've seen a limited Ben Dameron. We've seen them kind of tooling around with how they want to deploy their players. That's all typical stuff from Darkside at this point in the year. But I think on tape, Slow looks like they are capable of going up against Darkside and standing tall. So to me, they're the top challenger. And if UNC is not able to shift into gear, then yes, Slow certainly could beat them. But we've seen UNC do this before, right? They are
Yes.
capable of shifting into gear every year. That it just happens that way, and that's the benefit of having done this before and having a clear plan. So you're not going to catch me down Darkside until till the bell rings. But we're going to get some interesting data points later in the year in March when we start to see more of the connectivity come between the West and the East, between Easterns and SMI. Like it's going to be very telling about where these teams are and how they stack up against each other. But right now, those are in my mind the number 1 and 2 challengers, even more so than UMass.
It's very interesting to look at this slow team right now because every year I think they play above the level of their talent because I think the coaching and structure is very good there. They're a great defensive team every year. They've really forced teams out of being able to do what they want. And then in the years that they've been the best versions of themselves, they've also matched it with offensive potency. And I think you're looking at a team right now with elite level throwing and enough athleticism and size to challenge UNC for real. The problem is, I think that UNC does a lot of the same things and has done it and gone over and finished the job multiple times where Slow has come up short, often against that UNC program. But, Calvin Brown, Kyle Liu playing out of his mind this weekend. They have the star power that they don't always have. And, you look at last year with Calvin largely playing on the D-line, and, they just didn't quite have the horses offensively to get to the final step. And I think they might this year. The question is just really, can they figure out a way to take UNC out of what they want to do? But I think they're unquestionably the next team right now in the power rankings. Like, and maybe they can do it. I think people will understandably remain skeptical until they actually see it happen, though.
What was your take, like, when you look at how Colorado did this weekend? I mean, they were one of the teams that are obviously making their debut and have a lot of attention. What was your takeaway from how Colorado performed?
They look a little undisciplined, but I think they have the talent. I mean, it was kind of like a Chuck Fest yesterday against Slow, and it didn't really work out. I mean, Tobias Brooks is obviously already a big piece of what they're trying to do. But he did not have a great game. And, where do you feel like his performance this weekend puts him in kind of the rookie of the year conversation? Because I think we came into the year with the expectation that he was the heavy front runner, but is he throwing himself out of it a little bit?
I mean, I joked in the Discord. There was a moment where he caught the disc on the goal line, egregiously traveled, and then threw away a no-look assist, like tried to kind of dish it horizontally a little bit upfield without looking and missed it. And you want to talk about undisciplined? I mean, that's a pretty brutal turnover in the final. And yeah, I mean, I joked, did he just throw away rookie of the year? Like, was that it? Did he throw it? With such a strong rookie class out there, you can't afford to go out there and kind of goof off per se. But there's also times when he looks like, an All-American candidate on a team that we think has the potential to make semifinals at nationals, and that's probably going to overweight what else we see. And I think that there's this class in particular has like a texture of really good players on not necessarily great teams, and I think that that's not going to stack up well against Brooks's resume by the end of the year. So to me, he's still the favorite. It was one play. He's obviously still really good, and was a big part of why they've got this far. But I think we'll see him tamp down as we go through the year.
He feels like the classic, like if he's hitting, Colorado is unbeatable. Like he has the ability to change the game in a monster way. But he's going to have to learn a little bit more discipline than you're expected to have in high school and on YCC teams. I mean, when he was on his YCC teams, it was like him and a bunch of randos, kind of like it wasn't the same kind of super deep North Carolina teams we've seen in the past. And I think now he's got to recognize, like, I have to take care of the disc a little bit more. But I'm unsurprised to see him already getting the rock. And I think Colorado's going to be fine. I don't really know where I put their ceiling. I probably say semis, but they have the potential to basically beat anybody because if they start hitting on the shots, they're going to be super, super tough to beat.
I
Keith,
I'm probably not supposed to do this. I got to stay conservative on them after last year. I was really hyped on them last year and didn't go so well.
some to just go back to this, some discussion in the chat. Brent Russell says UNC beats Slow by 3. That's probably a pretty good early line, Vegas line on the game if they were to meet, in the finals of college nationals. And a little bit of pushback here from Emmett Holton. What do you think, Keith? Like if they were gonna meet in a neutral site right now, what's the line? Assuming both teams play their starters.
I think 2.5. I mean, 3 is a great line, but we basically eschew doing lines on the number around here, because nobody wants a push. Who wants push when you're just flying off the cuff? I think I would take Slow to cover that number. I'd still take UNC to win, but I'll middle that. I think Slow's. I mean, when you put Slow's top 7 up against UNC's top 7, it's a pretty interesting conversation. Like I don't think I would take anybody on Slow, even Calvin Brown or Anton Orm over Ben Dameron or Rutledge Smith. But after that, I mean, the next group of guys may all go Slow's way. I mean, when you go down the rest of that top 7, I may lean Slow on some of those matchups. So that's not something I think there's another team I'd say that about right now.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting. I think, Colorado, Cal Poly, clearly the class of this tournament. How about Oregon State making a little bit of a run? That was a pretty exciting move for them. Now, they didn't really have much in that game against Slow, but a nice win over Cal, 13-12 in quarters. And of course, at being Prez Day, you got to get through the power pools and everything else. So it's no easy buckets. They end up going 4-5 with wins over Santa Cruz, UBC, Utah, and Cal. They drop games to Cal, Oregon, twice to Cal Poly, and then they lose to Oregon 13-11 in consolation. But I mean, this is looking bid-earnish, Keith.
Yeah, a brilliant on paper weekend for Oregon and great on the field too. For Oregon State, I should say. They came out, they proved that they could compete with elite level teams. They were kind of a bubble team last year. They had a little bit of buzz, had some ups and downs throughout the season. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that persist for them this year, but you can see that they've continually recruited good talent. Like they've been getting good talent. They're benefiting from the strength of their community. And I think that you're starting to see that give them a deeper team. I think that they have, guys who we've known about, your Felix Morins, your Henry Waite's a nice recruit who's been strong for them as sophomore. But they're filling out the roster with more guys who can compete. I do wonder a little bit, like they seem a little bit dependent on the deep game. Like there were times when we saw the market. I think we need to see more of that. I think we need to see them be a little more diverse, both offensively and defensively. They kind of sometimes seem like they just want to outmuscle teams, which they can be very good at. They have some really aggressive throwers. They have some athletes who can go get it. They're going to be a scary team. I would put them in a favorable position in the Northwest horse race, but I can't say that to me they've separated themselves from the pack, which is this is a great result, but that region is going to be absolutely wild come regionals.
Yeah, I mean, I saw in the chat and I just checked it out. Shout out to Cody Mills for getting FrisbeeRankings.com updated for us this morning. Oregon State moving up 130 spots in the rankings into the last bid at the moment. They are the 4th bid for the Northwest, with, of course, at BYU being a question mark, maybe not going to deliver a bid, but Washington and Oregon up there as well. But Oregon sitting on the bubble, but right behind them is UBC, so also a Northwest team. Penn State sitting in the 20 spot. Obviously, all the caveats, it's still early, but Oregon State putting themselves and the Northwest in general in a pretty good position right now. I think they're the kind of team where you wonder, will they make it out? If they earn a bid, can they keep it? So what else stands out from the men's division, Keith, before we move on?
Oh, you get Oregon in the other semifinals, but I think the big storyline coming out of this tournament in the men's division is just kind of that Northwest versus Southwest bid battle, and the Northwest just absolutely clean the Southwest clock out here. You look at Cal losing to Oregon State, like that's the second best team in the Southwest losing to the fourth best team in the Northwest. You get UCLA putting up underwhelming results. They lose a game to UVic to open the weekend. To UVic, that's not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. So you look throughout the standings, and the Southwest teams just didn't really hold up as well at this tournament, and that's much to the benefit of the Northwest. Utah had a solid run. You mentioned Washington, Oregon State, Oregon, Utah State, UBC, all those teams. I mean, it's going to be crowded, but this was a good weekend for the Northwest as compared to the Southwest. Two regions that are certainly going to be in the hunt for extra bids. They're going to be hungry.
Well, and I mean, it's early, but right now, the Northwest and Southwest combined have 7 bids to college nationals. That's a lot. The AC only has 1. You got NC State sitting down at 22, missing the cutoff right now. You look at the North Central, they've only got 2. Wisconsin, not showing up in any way at warm-up. So there's can the Central and Eastern regions start to peel back some of these bids? It's going to come down to all the connectivity that we get later in the year, of course. So what happens at Smoky Mountain? What happens at Easterns? Can those teams get those key wins to pull some bids back towards the center and eastern parts of the country? Or is it going to be a heavy West Coast year?
Well, in the chat, Joel Sylvester is asking about the Northwest cannibalizing their own strength bids. Right now, I think they're actually in a good position to not do that. I do think you're going to see I think you could continue to see those teams beat each other, but because they're all so high ranked, it isn't going to be that big a deal if Oregon State loses to UBC. They're one spot apart in the rankings or whatever. Washington goes out and loses to Utah. Utah's got a respectable position, so I think that's actually probably not that big of a danger right now. I mean, maybe you got to watch out for Western Washington or something like that, but I think that they more are going to be worried about what's the Southwest doing, what's that second AC team doing, what's the fourth New England team doing. You also have the Southeast where UAH is now suddenly all up in the mix, and that makes a 2-bid Southeast. What's going to happen to those teams hunting for those extra bids? That's just one less available. So.
It's going to be a fun stretch. I mean, we're kind of through the first part of the season, and now we enter the heavy hitter part as we get into early March. So let's move over to the women's division. Oregon gets the win, 10-9 over Stanford after beating UCSD 15-4 in semis. Oregon, very impressive this weekend. They go undefeated, and they really don't even have a lot of close games until that game against Stanford. They beat Colorado 15-8, Keith. Listen, you have been very high on this Oregon team. I was a little bit more skeptical that they were going to be ready this early, and I think I'm already ready to say I was wrong. I don't necessarily think this is suddenly like a championship contending team, but they are certainly better than expected at this point in the year, and what a weekend for them.
Yeah, they come back against Stanford, break to win. Trout Wainwright gets the block to set up the game-winning drive for Dugan. It's funny. I was watching the end of the game, and Oregon was celebrating, and my wife came in, and she was like, "Oh, is this live?" And I was like, "Yeah." The game's over. Oregon just won. And she was like, "Wow, I feel like we never talk about them anymore." She's like, "When we first were dating, they were the team in the women's division everyone was talking about." And I was like, "Wow, even you know the narrative that Oregon is back, baby." Bring back Fugue. It's that time. I mean, it's a great win for them. You're right that I've been high on them because of the talent that they've been importing, but also kind of what we talked about Oregon State. You're seeing this team also get deeper. They're starting to get into having a really solid 10 to 12 to 14 players that they can run out. And yeah, obviously you're going to talk about Cyrus Linkfield, who I think is underrated still, and Trout Wainwright. And now they've got Acacia Hahn. You're going to talk about these big name players who played on national teams and stuff, but they go deeper than that. in my opinion. And I think that we're seeing some of those other players make big plays at these early tournaments. You're seeing Ty Zetos go out and make plays, and Zoe Luke and Michiko Magnet. Like these are strong players, and I think Oregon's definitely looks like they've been seasoned by their experiences over the past couple of years, and I think they're in a much better position to challenge going forward. I will say we're still not. I still think we're not seeing everything Stanford has to offer. This is still a Stanford team that's playing incomplete, and I think that they have a higher ceiling than what we're seeing from them. And like, I would temper expectations if you're just looking at this as like, oh wow, Oregon beat Stanford,
Yeah.
and we had Stanford as the number 5 team coming into the season. But the ground around UNC, like beneath them, has really shifted around, and we've got a very interesting race to be those other teams that are going to reach semifinals.
Definitely. I mean, Oregon is now 2-0 against Stanford, and I think you can write off SBI the Oregon win there and be like, well, Stanford was missing all these starters, da da da. And I know they're still missing some players, but at some point, Oregon is getting these wins, and like you have to give them credit for getting these wins. And we'll see what happens later in the year. I assume both teams will be at Stanford Invite, which is just in a couple weeks. So we'll get another look at everybody, and hopefully Stanford's back to full strength. But the only loss Oregon has taken this year,
dogged Colorado, so
dogged them. Wow, we got to get to that.
So.
But I just want to note, Oregon's only loss this season is to UBC, 15-12, and I think that speaks more to me about how good UBC is, rather than that Oregon after this weekend, that upgrades the win for UBC for me into this team. This team is like very credible as championship contender, can beat UNC. I see it. Not that I needed much convincing since I picked them, but so you want to talk about Colorado real quick?
All we're missing is Washington. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Let's talk. Because they're a big surprise this weekend.
So they lose 2 games. They lose to Santa Barbara, and they lose big to Oregon. Otherwise they kind of take care of business, mostly comfortable wins, close-ish game against Western Washington, but certainly that 7-point loss to Oregon is going to stand out. And, is it time to be concerned at all about Colorado, given that they did have Stacey Gaskill and Khalil Phillips out there on the field? I mean, that's been an excuse in the past, but it's not this year.
Yeah, I think you can be a little concerned about, what's the ceiling on this team, given the types of players that they've lost over the past couple seasons. I do think that like when before they felt like a very clear number 2, I think doesn't feel like they're quite there right now. I think that the ceiling is still there. Obviously, I still think this is a team that probably is an inside track to semifinals. I'm not worried about that necessarily, but they feel like they're maybe a range from competing with UNC, and they're not guaranteed at all a semi. Even if it's inside, even though I say they have an inside track to semis, there's a very strong group of teams that they would have to battle through, and I'd like nobody would be a favorite to make semis aside from UNC. When you've got Stanford, Oregon, Carleton, Vermont, Colorado, like that is a scary group. And like, look, UCSB's out here beating Colorado. Could UCSB be a team that comes up? Good Tufts. Like there is Washington. Like there's a number of teams that this is really becoming a thick race, and so you're not going to have a lot of room for error. I think Colorado has the luxury of taking the time to develop a little bit, so I don't think that they're necessarily like, okay, we have to come out and have this be a great tournament right off the bat. Like their bid situation secure. They know they got a long grind ahead of them. But obviously nobody wants to go out and lose by 7 to an elite team when you have a chance to compete against them.
Yeah, I think it speaks more to the fact that they're just not totally ready to go offensively yet. And I even remember thinking back to last year when Stanford played them at college nationals, and it was like this crazy result that this game was as tight as it was. And Colorado had sort of been crowned the obvious, challenger to UNC. And in the end, that is what we get. But I think that there were some cracks shown in that game that teams can take advantage of. You have to be able to take care of the disc after you get the ball from their offensive line, because I think you're going to get the ball from their offensive line. The question is, are you going to throw up 50-50s in Stacey Gaskell territory? Because that's not going to work out. But if you can grind unders and put scores on the board without taking those risky shots against their athletes, I think they're definitely beatable. It's just, that's obviously easier said than done. So I'm not like pounding the panic button here, but I do think Colorado looks a little further away for me than they did at this time last year.
Full agreement there from me. A disappointing weekend though. Like there's no way around it. I mean, everybody was thinking that they were a big threat to win this tournament, and they didn't really even get close to that with their results. So there's no way you can mark it as positive weekend.
How much more do we want to talk about Stanford? I mean, it feels like, they're clearly a really good team, and it just kind of, we have this question mark of how good will they be at full strength? And I don't necessarily feel like I have a great grasp on that answer to that question. Do you?
No, but I do have confidence that they're going to be good. I mean, we've seen this too many times. How many years in a row do we have to watch this team work their way through the regular season and get better? Like there's no team, not even UNC, who have more confidence in being better at the end of the year than at the beginning of the year than Stanford. And they're starting from a good place. I mean, they already, I think, look the part of a team competing for a semifinal spot, and that's without Annika Kwan playing yet. I think Ana Fisher-Lopez has also kind of been in and out of the lineup. Harper Bear looks like a great addition to the team.
Huge.
They got Sage McGinley-Smith back for this weekend. I think Harper Bear is going to be an All-American in the future. Not this year, probably not, but going forward after this year, I think we're going to be talking about her as potential All-American. She looks really, really good. And obviously, Esther Philippek, Macy Volbrecht, they're going to be able to drive things from the backfield. So I think this is a team that has some pieces to move around to figure out, but there's just no coaching staff you trust to do more. They already look like they're advanced in the complexity of their defensive sets. So that's what you want to see if you're looking at Superfly. I think that they're going to be a really tough outfit. I'm very confident about their ceiling as a team that could compete for a title and be in the semifinals. Not worried at all.
UC Santa Barbara goes 6-3. They drop 2 games to Stanford. They also lose a kind of a surprising loss to San Diego. They then beat them later in the weekend. And so I guess the question for me for this Santa Barbara team is, do you buy them as a semis contender at nationals? Because they're clearly the second best team in the Southwest. I mean, maybe UCSD begs to differ, but I think, when push comes to shove, this is the team I expect to finish behind Stanford at Southwest Regionals. Are they good enough to go further than that, or are they a little too top heavy?
To me, they're still in that like challenger class after the teams that we talked about as the clear semifinal teams. Like they're still, at that 7 to 12 range of the power rankings. I think that if they play their best and one of those top level teams, your Carltons, your Stanfords, your Oregons, if they play them and they play their best, I don't think UCSB can win. I think UCSB has to both play well and have their opponent not play their best, which is a difficult path to get to semifinals. They are good enough to beat a team not playing their best, like an elite team. They have the goods to do that. And I do think that it's been really promising seeing how their players are developing around, Laura Bloom and Julia Hasbrook and Devin Quinn. I think that they're getting away from being the kind of like, okay, Julia Hasbrook brings it in literally every throw for the entire game. She taps it in, and all our goals go to Devin Quinn. Like I think they're getting further away from that in a positive way, because I just don't know how sustainable that's going to be in tournament situations where you have to ask so much of those players individually. I'm not confident that they can necessarily get all the way away from it. Like when push comes to shove, are they going to go back to that? Potentially. But they seem like they're making positive strides to develop the rest of the roster in a really good way. Like they were getting good contributions from other players this weekend. So that could be a ticket for them, but I'm a little skeptical still.
I think we got to talk about, there was an ejection this weekend for Sophie Havernack from UCSB. for 2 yellow cards. So we've got the clips. Let's show the first one here. It's Spike. And so you're going to see Havernack here. Strike cut into the end zone. Catches it. Got the goal. And then big spike. Now it goes off screen, but it appears to have hit a Colorado player, which is kind of an auto yellow card. Like, this clearly wasn't an intentional spike to hit somebody. It just happened to go over there, Keith. Do you like the yellow card here? Let's just talk about this one first.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do like this yellow card. I think we do have to kind of stick to the rule of, like, if you spike it and hit somebody, it's a card. Like, that's just the way it's got to be. It keeps people from being like, okay, I can't just do whatever I want with my spike. You still see some people like throw it up in the air, and then you'll see a teammate come over and try and knock it down before it can hit somebody. You just don't want to risk anything where you're hitting another player. That could, breed bad blood. Obviously, I guess there's some chance it could be injured. I can say I've broken my nose from getting hit in the face with a disc before. It's possible to get hurt from a disc. But mostly, like, you just don't want players in any situation put the disc where they can hit another player. I think it's fine to have a card. Most of the time, cards are like kind of warnings, right? So there's a reason you don't get ejected for your first yellow or anything like that. Or there's really basically no penalty at all. It's your warning card.
Later in the game, we have this play where Havernack tries to make a bid onto an undercut, poaching off the back, and dives right into the path of the offensive player, who catches the disc. There is no foul call because of the catch. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this play. Pretty much a textbook dangerous play, like coming into the path. Gets the yellow, gets ejected, and the card comes later because play hadn't stopped for the actual play because there was no foul call since it was a completion. But we see the observers come together, and the card goes up. And because that's her second, the red goes up, and she's ejected from the game. So now, see a coach coming on the field right away. Over on X.com, Sophie said, I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge that I did make a reckless and dangerous play. Yellow there was deserved. I'd also like to extend my appreciation to the quandary coaches and players who advocated on my behalf to the observers, and hope we can play again this season. So, Keith, pretty much an obvious yellow. I almost think it could be a straight red. It was that bad.
Yeah, definitely a textbook yellow. I think the reason you have the reaction that it could straight red is because of how many bad outcomes we've seen from that type of play. Like, we know player going up the line, looking back at the disc with another player running into that space to try and take it away is like just a recipe for disaster. We've seen so many people get blown up that way. I don't necessarily know if I feel like this is like a straight red off the bat. And I get why people, I think that in general, people are drawing away from this was ejection worthy in combination with the spike. That, the spike's not that bad, which I agree with. It feels like in some, these two yellows don't add up to a red. But to me, both things make sense as a yellow on their own. And I even Havernack acknowledged online. This was a yellow worthy bid. There's really no debate about that. No surprise to your Colorado coming in and being like, no observers. Like, I'm sure if Quandary could play without observers at all times, they would. But yeah, definitely a yellow worthy bid, and the spike a little more iffy.
Yeah, I think that's just one of those auto ones. Like, if you want to spike, you need to make sure you don't hit an opponent with your spike. It's that simple. Like, you're going to get it. That would be the same thing in any other sport, right? If you celebrate and you throw the basketball and you hit an opponent with the basketball, you're going to get a tech. That's how it is. So
now here's the question. If the disc didn't hit anybody, does it deserve a yellow?
No, not from the video that we have here. There was just like a weird spike, sort of like a spike fail that happened to go bad and become a yellow. A strange, very strange spike. I guess you could debate whether spiking and inadvertently hitting somebody should or should not be a yellow, but it was. And then if you make a dangerous play after, you're running the risk of getting ejected, and that's what happened. Like, to me, some people are really up in arms about this because people are not accustomed to ejections happening in Ultimate games. But I think we have far fewer ejections than we should. And that's not to say that Ultimate players don't, try to play safe and play hard and play fair. It's just that, we, for a long time, stuff that should have been penalized hasn't been. And so it's starting to feel like, whoa, like, why is she getting ejected after just kind of this like sort of harmless spike? Well, if that was the second yellow, I might have more of a claim to say that was an overreaction from the observers. Given that it was the first, I really don't have a problem with any of this.
I think I'm in the same boat as you, and I do think that like if no one is like, wow, neither of those things. Well, some people are like that about the spike, but you didn't see like a vociferous counteraction in the video from anybody about either yellow card, including Kavernak. That didn't argue either. So I don't know if like it just feels like, oh, but an ejection, that line, we shouldn't cross that line for these types of offenses, but you got to aggregate them to keep people from doing these sorts of things.
All right. What else from the women's side, Keith?
UC San Diego, kind of the resurgent semifinalist performance. They had a really tough SBI. They fell out of our top 25 altogether. They're going to be back in it this week after reaching semifinals. So they get a big win they get two big wins, one over Western Washington and one over UC Santa Barbara, each of those by a single goal. They also get wins over Davis and Utah. So riding the ship a bit for UC San Diego, important for the Southwest, but also this was a team that like after struggling last season as well, it would have been easy to write them off completely. And they're going to fight their way back into the picture in a way that I'm very curious to see what they're going to do at their next tournament, because we've seen the ups and the downs for UCSD.
Yeah, they're still well outside of the bid picture, sitting at number 30 right now after a very tough SBI, but they did move up 15 spots, perhaps an opportunity to grab a potential fourth bid for the Southwest if they can continue to play more at this level. Right now, the Northwest sitting on 5 bids. Victoria at number 17 is actually in front of a couple of teams that are bid earners. But you've also got BYU in that mix, so keep that in mind. But it's looking very Evil Empire-ish up there in the Northwest again, Keith.
Yeah, I think a lot of the challenging teams have not really brought it in the way that you would have thought. So I think not only is the Northwest playing well, but like, Colorado State didn't have a strong debut at this tournament. We've seen mixed results for some of the teams out east as well. So we haven't seen teams step up to try and snatch that bit away with strong, consistent play. Now, to be fair, the East Coast has only played one tournament. So when they get more results in, we might have a very different picture. But as it is, Northwest is in a very controlling position.
All right. Well, it's very interesting Prez Day. We got to see a lot of these teams again in just a couple weeks at the Stanford Invite. UBC will be back in action there, and kind of like get squared up and ready to roll for the push towards the postseason. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, question of the week and more. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to Deep Look. Time for the question of the week. And I'll just give it to you, Keith. Here it is from Will in the Discord. You can get into the Discord and get all of our subscriber bonus segments out the back here from Deep Look and a whole lot more with an Ultiworld subscription at ultiworld.com/subscribe. If every college team could make an all-time starting 7, who would have the best lineup? Now, Keith, we've talked about this in the past as it relates to kind of like a mixed team, but we don't really have college mixed ultimates. So let's think about single gender here. Who's got the top all-time starting 7 from college?
This is a huge, this is like its own episode worth of question from Will. We could talk at length, and there was some great conversation in the Discord about what these lines would look like. You look at the men's division, which I think there's kind of like a clear set of teams at the top. You're thinking about Carleton, Colorado. I think those are two of the best teams off the bat. I don't know exactly where you slot UNC in, but Brown is another team I think that probably puts together a top group. And then maybe I'm thinking about your UNCs, your Pitts, Wisconsin, these long-standing programs that I think can put together pretty strong lines. But I think for me in the men's division, you're probably looking at Colorado or Carleton. I think I would take them over Brown, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah. I mean, like, who's in the Colorado lineup? And as Pat pointed out in the Discord, are we talking about the players as they were in college or the best that they ever were in their career?
I think somebody else said we should be
more
talking
interesting
peak.
to say the latter. Yeah, I think so too. I think it's more interesting to talk about peak. So you got Bo and you got Jimmy. You know, does like Matt a guy Taylor, like Stanley Peterson even make the lineup for the starting seven?
I don't know. He's gonna be on the borderline. Atkins? I mean, I think you'll have discussions. You know, Atkins. Yeah. How far back are you going to take Richter or Jolian?
I think you. Jolian probably yes.
Yeah. I mean,
they had some nasty player, right? Teams. Nasty teams back in the 2000s.
Yeah, they're very, very good.
Mac Taylor. Did we say that yet?
I said Mac Taylor. Adam Simon.
Quinn Finer
Parker
from
Krug,
recent times. Yeah.
Tim Morrissey. You remember him from the Jack McShane?
The Giannis brothers.
The Sneeders. Hilke Sneeder. There's a lot. There's a lot. It's a long list.
So then you've got Carleton. I mean, you think about the incredible groups that have come through Carleton and just the recruiting that they've had. I mean, just even in recent times, you know, Eric Taylor, Joe White, Nick Stewart. But if you go back further, Chase, Grant, Alex Nord. Like, I don't know. I feel like Cut has a pretty good case, Keith.
I think I would take Cut, to be honest. I mean, they go deep. Canner, Mike Caldwell, Simon Montague. We mentioned Nick Stewart, games player, like the Christian Foster. Then you get Joe White now, Saul Yannick. Like they're good. I think I would take.
I think Brown isn't deep enough.
Cut.
Yeah, I think Brown isn't quite deep enough. I mean, you've got Zipperstein, Justin Safdie, JR, Mac Hecht, but it's like, you know, I don't know. They would still be really, really good. I think I also probably pick Cut. All right. How about the women's side? Carleton is probably where I start thinking first, or Stanford. I mean, Stanford
Carleton, Stanford, Oregon,
over the years.
I think are like the three, the big three for me.
Trying to think of like, what are the lineups there? Like,
well, so there's an article we did a top mixed teams article based on college, but that was for 2015. So it's like almost 10 years old. And Stanford slotted in at 7, but it's a good place to start if you're looking for names. Like obviously you get Gwen Ambler and Dom Fontenette from Stanford, AJ Johnson,
Steph
Lauren
Lim,
Casey, Anessa Janes, Steph Lim.
Yeah.
They have a real shot. I mean, obviously, like they're the most dynastic program in the women's division history. So I don't think it's a surprise to have them near the top of this list.
Fugue, you're looking at like Beth Kaler, Jesse Schaffner. I feel like they have a lot of players who were really great in college and were like less prominent as club players, which makes me think they have less of a shot. Julia Sherwood, but maybe not deep enough. Carleton,
I don't know. they strike me as a strong contender. Chelsea Dengler, Sophie Darch, Kimber Coles. I don't know.
How about Carlton? You start with Miranda, and you're already in a pretty good spot, right? And then
Yeah.
what? Deb Cussin, Julia Snyder. But I also wonder, like, do they have enough of the biggest names? Like, now I'm wondering about Colorado. I mean, Alex Snyder,
Yeah.
Knee Win. I mean, I think long run, you look at some of the players right now in Khalil and Stacy as potential players on this list. We don't know what those players are going to be in the course of their club career, but if Stacy Gaskell keeps
I
playing
know
Ultimate, she could be a legend.
that's one of the hardest parts is like what do you do with these modern players who like
Right.
maybe haven't hit their ceilings? Does Jacques make the brown line?
I think yes.
Like where I think the players who are who are like in play now are hard to exact or have recently graduated. I think make it a little bit tougher to figure out exactly what to do. I'm like, this could Carly Campana play for Carlton? I don't know. I think that makes it tough.
Well, it's a great question, and it would be a fun exercise to go even deeper on this and like start to think about hypothetical lineups. But we're going to keep it moving as we have some upcoming college tournaments to talk about. Why don't we start with the Commonwealth Cup? It's the second one. This is the more competitive weekend. Tufts is the number one seed. This is a women's division tournament. Tufts, and then Chicago, SUNY Binghamton, Carnegie Mellon, Pittsburgh, Notre Dame, Georgia, Yale, Michigan, NC State, Ohio State, Virginia. Those are your power pools. So, Tufts should be the pretty heavy favorite here, Keith, but a chance for the Metro East to do some damage this weekend and kind of to see where things stand on the East Coast outside of that really elite top tier.
Yeah, you've got a lot of teams hunting for spots at nationals. This is a big tournament for bids. Even the pools below are teams that I think a lot of them think, hey, we have an outside shot at nationals at our regionals. Whether you're looking at your South Carolina or Brown, Duke, UPenn, who we saw have some solid moments at Queen City Tune-Up. Those teams are going to be looking to try and fight their way into the bracket to make a run. But we saw Yale and Pittsburgh have strong showings last year. So I'm very curious to see what those teams are going to look like and how they'll stack up against Tufts. But I do think Tufts is going to be the heavy favorite to win this tournament. I think I'd be surprised if there were any other outcome. But who are they gonna play in the final? That feels like a mystery to me. Favorite to start, Pittsburgh, maybe. But like, you can make a case for almost any other team in the power pools to be that team.
Yeah, I mean, I want to pick Georgia, but Georgia lost to Penn, who's seated below them. I don't know. I'm going to take Georgia as the second team, though. Is that crazy?
I think that's kind of like a perfect. Like I think that's something that could be attractive to people, given that we've seen the way that they played. When they
Yale
are
legit
clicking,
still?
they're hard to stop.
Like,
yeah, I think
should
so.
Yale?
I
should
think
Yale go to finals?
They might be my pick.
I mean, like,
they're playing in their first tournament when a lot of teams are already in their second tournament, so I'm a little worried that they're not going to come out all guns blazing. But
who did they lose?
They lost. Is she not playing this year? They lost a couple of O-line starters.
Okay.
And
I didn't mean to put you on the spot on this.
Ellie Jones is also not there, but they do have a number of returners, namely Wilhelmina Graf is going to be like the big star player of their team, but they're bringing back a number of players from that played key roles on last year's team. Sungshil Johnson, Caroline Eldridge, Yvonne Trent.
They're pretty legit last year.
Yeah, I think that they are going to be. I would be surprised if they can't make semifinals. I would say.
Yeah,
I think that's like what I would expect from them.
Well, I'm taking Tufts over Georgia as my pick.
Yeah, this is, you want to talk about difficult. This is a tough call. Let me just
You gonna
check
ride
the
with the Metro
bracket real
East?
quick. I might. I just want to
Fair.
confirm that
That's smart. That's smart.
their pool situation
I mean,
doesn't
Yale
mess
can
me
win
up
that
here.
pool. Yale can beat Pittsburgh and Chicago. That to me is totally plausible. And if they win the pool, then they
But
don't
if
see Tufts until finals.
if you finish second in the pool, then you're going to see Tufts in semis. So that's a confounding issue. I assume that if you're second in Pool A, if you're where you might want Georgia to finish,
She'll be on the
you go to
opposite
the
side of the
opposite side.
bracket, I
Yeah,
think.
that's true.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to take Tufts over Pittsburgh here. I think that's where I'll
Okay.
finalize.
Okay.
I think Pitt has had kind of like mixed results over the past few seasons, but I think that they were clearly like in that next year of teams at Queen City Tune-Up. So I like what I'm seeing from them. There was a player on their team who I was like, Taylor Conroy. I think a second year player for them. Very impressed with her ability to be a deep threat. So I think that Pitt could see some steps forward and establish themselves as a East Coast team to fear, or Eastern team to fear, I should say. Good luck, UConn.
All right.
Shout out to them.
You're going to feel really bad about yourself when the Metro East comes through and you didn't ride or die. You should be ashamed.
Well, you want me to pick UConn? I'll pick UConn.
All right. Eastern's qualifier in the men's division. 24 teams battling it out for. Do they have 2 spots on the line for Easterns? I think they usually do 2. But let's say it's 1 or 2 spots. The 1 seed is Penn State. Then you got Ohio State, UNC Charlotte, Wilmington, Emory, Georgia Tech, South Carolina, and Purdue. And there's a bunch of good teams behind them. I mean, it's like solid regionals teams tournament. Right now, 4 pools of 6 with 4 straight games Saturday, 4 straight games Sunday, grueling endurance tests to get your spot at Easterns. Notably absent is Alabama Huntsville, who has been given an auto bid to Easterns after the way they started their season. So lucky them. They don't even have to go to Easterns qualifier. Can Penn State keep putting up the results, Keith?
They don't have to go to Eastern's qualifier. They are an Eastern's qualifier. They've done it. Yeah, Penn State might be feeling like you couldn't slide one of those our way right now. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, for real.
We're out here getting breaks on UNC. What are y'all doing? Yeah, Penn State's gonna be the big favorite. But not unlike their conversation about Commonwealth, it's kind of like feels like anybody could be that next team that they face. I think the big favorites gonna be, you're looking at like Ohio State, Wilmington, and South Carolina, probably. South Carolina put up some questionable results at Queen City Tune-Up. Otherwise, they might be my pick off the bat. I mean, getting crushed by Wilmington was not a good look for them.
Not ideal.
Is that enough for me to? UNC Charlotte, also a team that I was like a believer in. Disappointing results. I'm not sure that I can buy on them right now. Wilmington has the loss to McGill. Like, what do you do with that? Like, is there anybody who's like truly compelling amongst this group? Is it just the 2 seed? Is it Ohio State?
Penn State is currently ranked 20th per Cody Mills. Right, we haven't had official USAU rankings yet, so these are all unofficial. But they're 20th, and then you got to go down to 33 for Ohio State. So, like, by the numbers, Penn State's the heavy favorite here, and I think their results are clearly been the best of any of the teams at this tournament. But that doesn't mean that you're going to win. You got to get through like solid teams, and teams kind of starting to hit their stride a little bit more. There's a little bit of tape out there on Penn State. We'll see how they manage through it. But I think they're the best team. I do think they're going to win this tournament. But the second team, I'm going to take UNC Charlotte. I think that's my pick for who makes the final. But I'm not high confidence in that. It's probably going to be out of nowhere. It's going to be like William and Mary.
I think that like I think that the most logical team to pick for Penn State to beat in the final is Ohio State. But you know what? I'm showing faith. I'm coming back for Gamecock Ultimate. South Carolina is gonna pull it
Wow.
together, and
Keith.
I'm taking Penn State over South Carolina.
Okay. You sure?
I'm doing it. It's lock it in.
Okay.
It's producer Lindsay Sue, lock it in.
All right. Lock it in. Keith's rolling with South Carolina. I mean, it's not like they had a terrible Queen City. They got smacked by Huntsville, but that team's really good. And then they sort of inexplicably got crushed by Wilmington. But yeah, I don't know if I see that
was
happening
just a everybody drops the ball. You know, it's one bad game. They got it out of their system, so they're coming back. That said, they got blown out by Wilmington, kind of like I'm blowing out the picks right now. I mean, I got a nice fat lead that I'm sitting on after.
Oh yeah,
Prez
let's.
Day.
What's the updates here? I didn't make picks last week.
Well, so you did not, but Edward, he came on as a guest and made picks for you, and he got you 1 point.
Why
with this?
Why
picks.
would he? Why would you let him do that? he makes horrible picks.
Well, he
didn't even have slow in the final. He didn't have slow in the final.
He got slow getting upset.
That is a clown show right there. What do you? I did not agree to this. This is fraudulent. I deny this completely. I'm down 20.
Well,
I'm down 18 points right now. Holy cow!
Do the rest of us not get any? Do the rest of us not get any points for Prez Day because you weren't there? Is that how this works?
That's what I think should be correct. I mean, what are these?
We'll take it to producer Sue to decide after the show if we're gonna keep these points live. But I had Stanford over Oregon in the women's division final. Obviously went the other way. I was a hold away from nailing it. So the subscribers are going to go with Colorado over Oregon. So they get a point for getting Oregon right. And in the men's division, slow over Colorado. That's exactly what the subscribers had. They take home all the points for that. I had slow over Oregon, so missed on one of those. And Edward did get his Colorado point, but did not have any of the other correct finalists or winners.
That's just horrible. I would have picked slow to win, and I feel that I should get 4 more points. But whatever. That's what I get for not showing up. I could have made my picks too. I could have put them in the Discord. Shame. But you know what? It's going to be an asterisk, Keith. It's going to be an asterisk at the end of the day. All right.
So Thanks everybody for tuning in. Points. Subscribers have 16, and Charlie has 11 right now.
Well, I want to answer this one question before we go. Jalal asks, how do you feel about the seedings varying so drastically from the rankings? I mean, really, there aren't official rankings yet, isn't the first thing I'd say. And the second thing I'd say is that, at a tournament like Eastern's Qualifier with 24 teams, like, you can't really complain about your seed. You just got to go out there and play the games in front of you. Like, teams are not that far apart at this tournament. Like, what's the last team at Eastern's Qualifier? What's the 24th seed? Virginia State. Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech. All right. Where is Virginia Tech in the rankings right now? They are at 81st. Okay. And then you've got Penn State at 20th. So all of these teams are from a 60 bucket window, and there's 24 teams. Now, I maybe there's other teams that are lower ranked. I don't know. But my point is that it's like mostly regionals teams that are solid, and there's not that much differentiating them. So I think mostly you should look for regional diversity and new, diversity of opponents, and not worry too much about the seeding at this point in the season.
Should this tournament be Swiss draw?
Sure. Anything besides this 4-and-4 format. Yeah, 4 games Saturday, 4 games Sunday. I don't even think you're allowed to do that. I mean, I put in the Discord, they should make 8 pools of 3, and then you either go straight to pre-quarters or you have a 2-3 crossover round. But, cut the games back. You should have 6 or 7 games on the weekend, not 8. I genuinely think it matters.
I think, I can't, I don't know. Somebody could probably tell me mathematically if in Swiss draw you could lose a game and still win this tournament. with 24 teams. I don't know. It's time to mess around with tournament formats more. Look, they're doing random draws at USA Ultimate Nationals. Like, we can start random drawing some more at these regular tournaments too. But this is not it. This format is definitely not it. So you might as well experiment with something more fun, because 4 pools of 6 is bad ski. I think this is a great place to mess around with Swiss draw.
Well,
at least double limb
from
bracket
teams.
or something.
I totally agree. It'd be more fun. All right. That is going to do it for this week's Deep Look. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you next week, Tuesday, noon Eastern, every week, right here on YouTube. 49ers going to win it next year, Keith. Don't worry.
The Falcons definitely aren't. So.